My name's Adrian Shaughnessy, and I'm one of the co-founders of Unit Editions. Unit started, we've just passed our 5th birthday. We've been going for 5 years. And it came out of a conversation that I had with Tony Brooke, one of the other founding members, that we're both in a very similar position, but we'd arrived at it from different angles. He'd been very frustrated designing books for mainstream publishers, and I'd become very frustrated working with mainstream publishers, and we both had kind of independently reached the position where we wanted to start our own publishing house. Well, we have a tagline. We say, I have to get this right, we say design books for designers by designers. And really all that's saying is we're designers first and foremost, not publishers. We're interested in books, designers interested in books. It always amazed me that when I dealt with mainstream publishers that they sometimes they wouldn't know a lot about the books they were publishing, and they wouldn't know how directly to speak to designers. We know how to do that, so that's why our tagline is what it is. We can talk directly to designers, ask designers, and the way we choose our titles to publish it's a long, drawn-out process. Tony and I argue and debate and discuss endlessly. But essentially, we want books that are different, the sort of books that mainstream publishers just wouldn't touch, they wouldn't know how to deal with. And we want a mixture of contemporary and historical. But we have one rule when it comes to historical books, and that is the subject matter has to be relevant to a contemporary audience. So if we didn't feel that you could learn anything from a historical figure, we wouldn't do it. But the books we've done, like Ken Garland, F.H.K. Henryan, Herb Lubalin, there is so much as a designer that you can learn from these people. They're not only were they great designers, but they were amazing people, and they conducted themselves in a way that I think is exemplary. So we'd always choose subject matter that we felt had contemporary relevance, and that applies to the text. The text looks to find what those points are, but also the design. Because we're designing historical subjects, the books aren't designed historically, they're designed with a contemporary viewpoint. Okay, for a case study, I think I'd like just to look at these 2 books we've done here on design manuals. And this came out of the reason we did them was when we were working on one of our first books, which was a book on total design. We went to the Total Design office in Amsterdam, and they had the most amazing collection of old identity manuals. Now, most people today don't have to deal with identity manuals. They use a PDF or a website that gives you all your templates. But before the internet, if you were implementing an identity, or if you were creating identity, you had to produce a manual. And these manuals were massive, big, hefty volumes, usually ring binders, that gave you every possible instruction that you needed to implement an identity. And these books are amazing. They are beautiful pieces of beautiful pieces of information design. They are extraordinary things, but most of them are being chucked out. Who needs them anymore? Because you can put all these guidelines, all these identity rules, you can put them online, much easier than these huge, expensive books. But we found this tranche of them, and we spent ages thinking, what should we do with these? We were thinking of a very sort of cheap, inexpensive publication. But when we started to work on it, we realized that it needed a book that that did these manuals justice. So we've ended up with these 2 really hefty volumes, and we've been absolutely knocked out by the success of the first one, which came out only about 6 months ago, and pretty much sold out, not quite instantly, but sold out very quickly. And it mystified us hugely as to what the attraction was. But I just think it's something to do with the kind of tactile nature of these original materials, these original manuals, And the fact that they are beautiful things and you know, amazing pieces of information design. It's been phenomenally successful, and I think it's a mixture of how we present them. I mean, we go to great length to make sure that all the material that is in here is photographed immaculately and retouched immaculately. And our rule is we don't show anything that you can't read. So if we're shrinking down one of these manuals, we're only going to shrink it down as far as the legibility will be held, maintained. So you can study these things as if you have the original manuals, and they are absolutely beautiful things. They come from all over the world. They're done by very smart people like Paul Rand. You know, some of the best designers ever have designed these manuals. Where design is concerned, Tony usually starts. He sits and starts thinking about it. He might then work with one of the Spin design team on a grid and a layout, and then Tony and I get together and we start discussing it. What are the parameters? And we quickly realised here that we needed to show these things as realistically as possible, because their attraction is the fact that they are amazing pieces of production, amazing specimens of print and printing. So he and I will start discussing, and eventually, at the same time, I'm thinking about the editorial content. What texts do we want? What commentaries do we want? What captions do we want? And eventually it comes together in a kind of editorial and design combination. And it goes back to something I said earlier, that the thing that's really important to us is that although some of this stuff is 30, 40 years old, we always set it in the design has always got a contemporary bite to it. We don't want to produce corny, outdated design. And some design books fall into that trap of being about historical subjects, so they feel that the design has to be historical. We don't think that. So the fact that we use contemporary fonts and contemporary design and layout is really important to us. I think the only thing, if we're going to do a third volume, we might look at is we've got quite a lot of style guides, manuals, guidelines that are quite small. They're not necessarily these. Most of the work featured in these two volumes are big manuals. There's another kind of layer of type of manual which is much smaller. So we might look at that. But we have enough material. We know we've got enough material to do a third volume. And the nice thing that happens with something like this is people keep contacting us and saying, hey, in my attic I've got this and I've got that. So we could do a third volume easily, but we might want to look at a slightly different kind of manual. Because we've upped our production, we've had to increase the team. So we're now looking at we've got a permanent staff purely working on unit editions of 3, a designer, an editorial coordinator, and a kind of communications person who's using social media to talk to our audience. And then we piggyback off the Spin team when we need extra muscle. So at any one time there might be 5 or 6 people working on unit editions. But we realise if we're going to keep the momentum up, we need more. Somebody once said to me a really good thing. They said nothing succeeds without the right number of people. And I think you can muddle along for a while with kind of, just a few hands, but at some point you need the right number of people, and I think we're moving towards that.